Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about, are there tabletop role-playing games with social rules or good social rules?
social conflict rules,
I don't know what that means, but
social combat.
I don't think there's social combat, but whatever.
I think sometimes people think that there's social combat in a way like real combat, right? That people are trying to get an angle on each other, or what do you call that? Edge on one another.
They spend an edge?
No.
Sorry.
Not specifically Shadowrun Edge. When they're trying to get over on somebody else.
So I don't know about that.
Some people might consider that like social combat.
I don't know about the term social combat. I don't know if somebody actually said that in what you read, but what I looked up, I didn't really see that.
Really?
I saw people, and I don't want to use the word complaining. I want to use the word trying to figure out how to make stuff better. I'm going with that. I don't know if I believe it, but I'm going with it.
Trying to ascertain what is going on.
That's usually in a Jane Austen novel.
So, what were they complaining about? Exactly?
I said I wasn't using the word complain.
What possibly could it have been griping about? So, I think there's the griping on both sides.
I don't know that there's
That
sides.
argument. Well, okay, I'm an older gamer. I've mentioned that before. For many years, there's certain issues that never came up. I can't think of many right now, but one of them is this idea of social conflict within a role-playing game and how to deal with that. In our game, I think if you start off like I did, learning how to play D&D with the original rules, which were very
War game like.
well, there's that. It did come from this game called Chainmail, or developed from Chainmail. But over that, it was also, you're right, it was very warlike and very miniature
Based.
combat like. So
Well, I think that's one of the things when you say social combat, I go, well, are you going to put your pieces out on the mat and draw what's going to happen? I don't think so. For if you're going to try to convince somebody of something, you're just going to say it. I understand where people have issues with this because they're saying that there's no rules to assist you to do that. Why should it just be a one roll and either you did it or you didn't? But that's basically what you're doing, right? You're saying, this is what I want to do. I'm going to talk to this person and I'm going to persuade them to come over to our side, or I'm going to persuade them that we should be able to do this. So that's a social interaction, right?
right,
With someone that's not in your party.
group side.
So there's skills for those kind of things, right? But
Yeah.
a lot of the time, a lot of things, and I think one of the biggest problems currently is that there's a lot of mini maxers out there.
Oh,
So you want to have a really, really strong fighter. So you cut your charisma
I see.
and you go with all strength or dexterity or agility, whatever the skill is, whatever the attribute is. And you bump up your character to be such a tank that he can't have a conversation with anybody because his charisma is 8 and his willpower is 6.
I think in most games where power gamers like that exist, it never comes up, right? They're making a combat-focused character, and social interaction is something that doesn't really occur in their games, or they don't participate when that type of element is in the game, I think. Or they just ignore the rules and they just talk. If there are people who have eloquent speaking skills and stuff like that, they'll just ignore the rules that say, well, your charisma is like 6 and you're speaking like you have a higher charisma and you have or have a higher intelligence and stuff like that. So I think those types of RP role-playing elements really don't, for those power gamers, it seems it doesn't matter, or they're just ignored later on by both player and GM.
Or, as one of the people that we read said, he specifically builds a power fighter so that he doesn't have to have any social interactions because he's uncomfortable with talking in front of people.
Right. In fact, and a lot of times I've seen that, I read that or read similar comments by people who put down when they go to a convention game or they start playing a game and they have pre-made characters, they will shy away from the sorcerer, which I guess because they have usually a high charisma, and a bard because they're the ones who also have a high charisma but also who are supposed to be like the face or the representative of the group.
So in a modern game, not a D&D game, in some other kind of game, they would shy away from the same kind of things, right? The face of the group,
right?
The person who
in Shadowrun there'd be the
well, in Shadowrun it totally depends on how you choose to make your character, whether you can talk to people in a kind way or not.
Well, there would be the street samurai, right?
Yeah.
Instead of they actually have a face man.
Yeah.
Not a class.
A
but
street
archetype.
samurai can talk to people. It's just that they may seem intimidating with either their katanas hanging over their shoulder or all the guns that they have about their person.
I thought you said they talk with their katanas and Mac 10s or something.
Well, they do, but a lot of people don't take kindly to such things.
So another thing is that I noticed that people who were saying that there's no social interaction rules, I kind of thought that was kind of weird because you pointed out rules right away, like in D&D, and you pointed out rules in Shadowrun that deal with exactly that social interaction, whether dealing with interrogation, persuasion. I don't know about
in Shadowrun specifically, they have etiquette.
Etiquette. That's the word. That's the one.
And that was one of the big things I really liked with the first time I made a character in Shadowrun was the idea that you could actually form your character to be the one that's talking, right? And so if that's your thing, you want to be out in the front and making the deals and
Right.
and getting your runners ready to go and interacting. I said "and" way too many times in that sentence.
That's fine.
Interacting with the non-player characters or the world in Shadowrun, you can actually build your skills to do that. And one of the people that I was reading made a comment that they didn't want it to be just I'm going to say I do this and I'm going to roll the dice and the dice are going to determine whether it's successful or not, right?
I think that that was the point, but I think it was but the person who wrote that comment also said they didn't like the idea that they would roll once and then be able to control somebody or totally charm somebody. And I think it was a dig at D&D where you can do this charm spell, and I think it's people who don't want their agency taken away, their player agency, and it's something that they don't like, the idea that the one thing that they can control, one character in the world, can be so easily taken over by a simple spell and a one roll failure. I think that the idea that it should be this ongoing kind of a thing instead of just one roll. I think somebody also mentioned the game The One Ring because it has quite a bit of rules about how to deal with interacting with people who are important, kings, wealthy people, and they tell you, there's different ways of interacting with people who are like dignitaries and stuff, and they go, you can use riddle or you can use lore, and it's this like ongoing game. What are you going to say to them? And then you would roll riddle to see how successful you are in your introduction of yourself and or carrying the conversation. And they say it should be this long process of trying to gain favor of this person who could or could not be a future patron of yours. And I think that's very interesting. A lot of people pointed out The One Ring.
Did they as a good thing or a bad thing?
As a good thing, as a
Okay.
good way, as having good social interaction skills, right? and how to deal with it more than just
There's still
one.
skills, though, right?
Right. Instead
So
of
if you
just
don't
roll.
have lore, then
riddle.
then you have to either ask somebody else in the group who does have it,
That's correct.
which is part of social interaction, right? Getting the people on your side to help you with this. But also, it also shows that even in older games, D&D and Shadowrun, they have the same kind of things, right? It's persuasion and not only that, I think more importantly, it's how the GM uses the rules or adjusts them to the players at the table.
I think you're right. I think that's the key. I think when you look at rules of D&D, it was like interrogation, persuasion is like one roll. And a lot of people think that being able to convince somebody of something, it just not just being this really high roll that you need to roll, but once you achieve it, it's done. And they think of it as that's just one roll and it's too easy.
But it's really not just one role, because you have to. Usually, if you're trying to persuade something of somebody of something, the GM is going to make you say exactly what you're doing, and then you can roll the dice. He's not going to let you do the whole thing at one time. Well, I want to persuade him to let us into the castle and take us to the prisoner and help us to get the prisoner back out.
Oh,
It's going to be one roll at a time on the way.
Well, there's that, but I think you're right. I don't think there's any problem with that kind of way of dealing with that situation. But I'm not sure the person complaining about the rules was the rules don't help you in that kind of role playing. And I think a lot of people think when they read the rules, it's I just got to roll once and then I'm done. And for the person, there was a post on Twitter, I believe, which I don't like Twitter, but there it is. And he was, I would say, complaining that was too simple of a thing for a complex social interaction to just leave it to one roll. But I think that's very heavy-handed of that person complaining about that, because I don't think just because the rules don't give you the ideas or explain, or unlike the One Ring where it says this person is going to take a while to be convinced of your not being a deceitful, cheating person, because in the One Ring, with the situation of the current situation you're playing in, people are very distrusting of strangers, and so
There's a lot of shadow.
So they would need to be convinced that you are a person of good intention, and so there's this constant, not a constant, but there's this long, lengthy way of gaining somebody's favor or convincing them that you're not a bad person. But
Also in the One
but
Ring,
in the D&D rules, it just doesn't really say that. It doesn't give you that kind of guidance. It just says roll. You got to roll above a 17 to be able to convince Charlie that they should let him in, or whatever, the guard, to let him into the gate.
I know that in Pathfinder, which is very crunchy,
Right.
that when you do rolls for certain things, social things, it depends on what you roll, how much information you get, or you have to get a success. You have to meet the number to
Right.
get certain information. And the higher you roll over that, sometimes they'll give you a little bit more information.
Correct.
And I think a lot of games have that kind of aspect to them.
Right.
But I think the biggest thing that maybe behind I don't want to use the word complaint, because I don't think it's really a complaint. I think it's like a cry for help, that the rules aren't helping me. And I think it's more people who are uncomfortable with role playing, or they want it to be, they're like the rules lawyer who wants to make sure the game is even. There should be rules to help people who are uncomfortable with the role playing aspect, or at least that's kind of the vibe I got off of these questions.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think a lot of people are trying to deal with this influx of a lot of people playing role-playing games. And some of these people have like social anxiety, they're extremely shy, and other issues like that. And I think when you try to play with them, sometimes they have an issue with being
They're uncomfortable letting go and just be going into this, immersing themselves in this world and
Right.
being there.
Right. And so when you play with somebody like that, I think sometimes people who are wanting a better social conflict set of rules are people like that, right? Who don't like talking a lot and don't like being the center of attention very much, and rather just have a nice set of rules that they can look at and be able to just roll and deal with those kind of situations that they feel uncomfortable role playing at the table. And especially with strangers, I think we're dealing with people who are have anxiety with strangers, or even in your own group. That's never happened that I remember with my group. I keep saying that I'm an old gamer, and I am. I started playing when I was 11 in 1978, and all my friends were started playing around that time. My brother was a little bit older than me. He was about 4 or 5 years older than me. But still, we were all learning at the same time, discovering this game at the same time, trying to interpret the game at the same time. And fortunately for me, I don't think anybody in my group was shy. I mean, I'm looking at Esteban, Sip, Felipe, Mike.
Well, you guys were all, but there's a comfort level also with how comfortable you are with the people that you're playing with, right? The people that you've been playing with since you were 11, you're still playing with them.
Right.
And the people that you've picked up along the way have all been very gregarious and very outspoken. I don't think there's too many people, although some of them might say they're introverts. Sitting at a gaming table with them, I would disagree. I haven't seen it. But I have been in games when, like running games for kids where you want to help them to develop those skills, and you want to make them feel comfortable about it. I've also been in games at conventions where there were people who were like very timid and didn't want to talk.
Right.
And I can understand that. I've been there. I was once in a Doctor Who game.
Oh yeah, I remember.
And I remember the people were like all over the top, and I was just like
super fans.
They were super fans, and I was sitting there going, "Whoa, this is like." There were a lot of people too. There were like 8 players, and I was just sitting there going, "Okay, this is what I want to do," but I was not like feeling the vibe of being out there and
the character.
Yeah, so I can understand I don't know these people, and my comfort level is very low.
Which is weird because you are a Doctor Who fan yourself. So it would seem that you would be in your element, but because they were really into it, you seem intimidated. I mean,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's kind of strange because like I thought you would have had a great time in that game.
I did have a good time, but I was not very extra. When it was my turn, I said, "This is what I want to do," and I wasn't like. I felt more like, "This is what I want to do. Here's what I want to do," but I didn't give it any like role playing experience, right?
Yes. You weren't in character too much.
No.
Yeah, and that does happen when you're at a table and everybody else is super really into it, and you're like, okay, yeah, and might be intimidated by the other players. I remember you mentioned kids, and I did run a lot of kid games at the conventions. I haven't lately because
the boys aren't kids anymore.
Right. Well, I did run because my son was small, and I wanted him to be excited, and I wanted something for him to do in the role playing aspect. Because sometimes there's a lot of board games and stuff for little kids, but a lot of people didn't run RPGs for kids, and I was like, yeah, I run RPGs, and I ran a lot of Gamble World. I ran even some D&D games, and I think I ran all kinds of games. And then later on, as my son grew older, they have a teen room at the local game conventions, and I ran Star Trek Adventures, which always had a table full of adults and one teenager, which was still fun.
Teenagers have priority,
right?
But Star Trek is like.
And I ran in the teen room and the kids room, and it didn't matter. The adults could apply or not apply, but sign up for the game, but teens would get preference. And for some reason, my games weren't that appealing to teens. I don't know what happened. And my son stopped playing with me when he was
at conventions.
When he was about 12 or 13, and then he would go off and play other games. But I still ran games because the lady in charge of the teen room and the kids room kept asking me to run games because we need kids at kids room games. I go, I'll do it. And I just kept doing it. Anyway, so where was I going with that?
The comfort zone.
Yeah, there was this one there's these two kids actually. They were brother and sister, and the sister was younger, and she was cute as a button. She was this little girl, and never played a role playing game. And we were playing Gamma World, and she didn't even know what to pick. Like, I had all the pre-generated characters, and then everybody would pick the ones they wanted, and then there were only a few left. It was a small table of 5, but I always made like 8 or 9 characters. And so I listed the ones, not the monsters, but the characters, and she picked the one based on a cockroach. And then, and so I would really go over what they could do, right? Your character can, when you get attacked, you can do this. So when you want to do something, you can. There are your skills and stuff. And then she realized that one of her attacks was spitting this acid stuff. And every time she got into combat, I would, she could, use a sword or a club and all this other stuff. And she goes, "I want to spit." And so it was very cute to see her do that. And her and her brother would come back to my table year after year. We would play Gamma World or some other game, and slowly her shyness went away. Because she was like I hate to say a repeat customer, but a repeat gamer to my table. And by the time the last game I played with her, or she played with us, the shyness was gone. She was
also a little older.
And she was a little older, yeah, right. And I think that was very interesting for me to see that. And that does happen, right? When you're new to the game and other people are not, you are a little bit intimidated about the situation, and there is that social anxiety of, well, how do I act? How do I do things? And because our role-playing games is not a skill or something that is really pushed into society. So, and then I have had adult people like that. Like I ran Star Trek Adventures again in the teen room, but it was a bunch of adults and one teenager, and one had never played before. One had never played a role-playing game. So I'm like, the pressure was on. But she did really, really well. She was a fan of Star Trek and was very happy to play pretend. And once she knew what the table was all about, it was like, okay, she understood what the role-playing deal was.
And Star Trek Adventures or whatever.
It was Star Trek Adventures.
Whatever Star Trek. If you're a Star Trek fan, that's a great gateway role-playing game for people to come in, because there's this one guy, and I don't remember his name, who runs Star Trek all the time at the conventions. He's a really nice guy, and he has a Enterprise bridge model, and he has little action figures. If you know the genre, you're like, oh, this is really cool. So I wasn't uncomfortable in that game at all, but also that had to do with you were there and Jonah was there.
Oh, yeah.
And that made me feel really comfortable being able, because I know you guys, right?
Right.
So I wasn't because sometimes I get nervous around, for some reason, at conventions playing in games where I don't know the people, and I don't know why, because once you sit down and play with them, you realize that they're just like all the other people you play with, right?
Yes.
But there's that kind of scary factor at first, but you just have to keep doing it until you feel comfortable with it.
Right. And I think some people have that problem.
Star Trek Adventures was a lot of fun, and I think I played Worf, and I had a lot of fun doing that. I think you played Guinan when we played.
Yeah, and it was weird because I'm like, how do I play Guinan? Because I'm not a wise person, and she's very soft-spoken and talks in this way that makes people go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I have no clue as to how to say that, say the things that she did. I'm not a fan enough to maybe even repeat some of the lines she ever said. So I was completely lost, and I'm like.
But you just did it anyway.
I wanted to play, and it was the only character left. I think everybody, by the time I showed up, it seemed like everybody already had their characters, and it had been like an ongoing game because other players had already played in this game, other people. So like this, I don't know if I want to say his name, but he had fans of his game because they were Star Trek fans, and he ran a Star Trek game. And they had already played in previous games, so they were like, oh, this is my character. And I could tell that they had already staked out and already played out those characters.
Well, sometimes if you go into a genre game, like when I was playing that Doctor Who game, there was a girl that came in with a fez on.
Fez on her head, I saw that.
I knew that she was going to play Doctor Who just by looking at her, because she was like, this is who I am.
Did she have a coat too?
Yes. It was a very cool, it was a very interesting experience.
That was run by Mike, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I think that does happen when you go into a room and there's complete strangers there, and you're like, might be intimidated. I understand that. I don't know if I've ever been intimidated by going to a game.
You do not have the same personality that I do, dude.
I don't know.
I when I'm asked to do things, I recently at work we are doing these lean in circles where we're supposed to interact with our fellows at work, and I told Saul, I just looked at the questions and wrote down just answers that were neutral, and I ended up having, and every answer I gave they were like amazed with, and I'm just sitting there going, okay, I don't know what these people are amazed.
I mean, it worked, right? Because
yeah.
you were able to make a connection to the other people in your group, and they were very excited to like learn stuff from you. And they're like, "Oh, I know, I do that too," or whatever.
And I was like, "I'm just here because I have to be." That's what I'm thinking, right? Because it's for work, and it was
And you're not that type of person to
I am not a
share touchy feely.
I
stuff.
do not,
Yeah.
especially at work. I'm
I'm here to do my job. Please leave me alone. That accurately describes you. And I think a lot of people are like that. I mean, I don't know. I have that same issue at work where I'm just here.
But role playing helped me to be able to do that, right?
Right.
I looked at what the questions were and I go, okay. And I didn't think it in my head, I'm going to play this like a blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I just looked at the questions. I go, okay, these are the questions they're asking. These are the most neutral, because I do not like to divulge information about myself at work.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
which is-
they're your coworkers, not your friends, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And so there's different levels of but playing role playing games like at conventions and stuff is a lot different, because you feel more comfortable with those people, even if you're intimidated at first by a table full of people you don't know. You do know they are gamers, so that gives you a comfort zone,
and you're not
right?
playing yourself, right?
Right.
You're playing a role, and I think that gives you a little bit of a. For me, it allows me not to be myself, and if people don't like me, well, it probably didn't like my character or the way I played my character, and not necessarily didn't like me.
Right.
At least I say to myself every time I play.
So what are some of the ideas that you can think of that would help GMs to make people who feel that there aren't social rules within the game that allow them to explore their character and play comfortably? If there's someone sitting at the table that is uncomfortable, what are some of the things that GMs could do to make them feel comfortable?
Wow, I don't know. That's a big, that's a tall order. I think what you can do is read the room. As a GM, you always have to like figure out what people, whether they're your friends that you've been playing for a long time, or when you step in, or when you're at a convention. And I'm the nervous convention GM, right?
He always gets nervous before he runs a game. Like, he hasn't run it 500 times.
Though this one I feel pretty good about. But
and when he gets there, his stomach's going to be upset. He's going to be, I need a couple hours. He's going to sit down and relax before he runs the game, because he doesn't want anyone to not have a good time.
Yes, it's a curse being that I have. Not want to disappoint people. But you're right. I am that way. And so I get nervous, and I get like, you're right. I go, oh, my game's in an hour and a half. I'm going to go to the room and probably take a shower, decompress for a little while, write some notes down, and then like Jolene, and then people go, "Are you okay?" And then Jolene goes, "Yeah, he's fine, fine."
Just leave him alone. Let him go have his little crisis before he runs his game.
So I do know what anxiety is, but it's a different performance anxiety at that, because like that's how I feel, is that I'm going to put on a game, and I want people to enjoy themselves, and because in a little way I feel that
you're responsible for
putting on a good game that people will have a good time, because that's the whole reason they come to a convention. That's why I go to a convention. And I've only been really disappointed a couple times as far as role-playing games, and that's a tremendous track record for all my fellow GMs out there. Sure, some of them weren't fantastic games, but we have a good time when we get to the table.
So you read the room.
So I read the room as a GM, right? When people immediately when people are, I usually put not the characters sheets out there, but I put the pictures of the characters, and I usually get a index card, and I write what the character types are, like an archetype, maybe a short description of the character, and I leave that on the table. And before a long time ago, I used to have like a
A dossier.
No, I still do that, but I used to have like a little like a list of the characters, and you get to vote which one you want, and blah blah blah. And it was a big huge deal that didn't need to be done, right? So I just tell them, okay, these are the characters. You can look at the character sheets if you find one that looks kind of interesting, and you guys can decide whether how you guys want to choose your character. You can just say, oh, I want to play this one or this one. Does anyone have any preference? You can arm wrestle. You can thumb wrestle. You can go into fist fights about it, but I would suggest not doing that. Just to break
Break the ice.
break the ice, and people laugh or don't laugh because of my dumb joke, and then they usually just say, well, and then usually what happens is wouldn't mind playing this one or that one. I have a real strong preference for this one. I feel strongly about this or whatever, right? And that tells me, like the first person to talk, okay, that guy has no problem talking in front of the
Right.
group. And then it goes, and then
Yes.
it goes, and then it goes in order. Like, okay, another person will say something, and then the last person to talk is usually somebody who's a little bit shyer than anybody else. He goes, well, I'll play whatever's left, or none of these really make any difference to me.
Or they
don't say it.
Or they don't say anything.
So I'm like, okay.
That's the one you don't want to give the captain to, right? That's the one that the face probably, that maybe they will be good, but maybe they won't be comfortable.
And I don't give the characters to anybody.
I know.
Right? So they choose among themselves. And I think that's a good way of figuring things out. What is it? Paying attention to the room.
Which is a skill that Saul is not innately have, paying attention to the room. He's learned it, but it doesn't come easily to him. Reading people is not a good skill for Saul.
Okay, I can read people. I think I'm pretty good at reading people. What I'm not good at are reading people who BS a lot. So that's my weakness, right? That's my kryptonite. The people who lie for whatever reason. And that's outside the RPG room. So usually I'm okay with everybody else in the room, at a game room.
Although he is learning.
So I think that can be as a GM, you have to even before the game starts, that tells you a lot of information, what's going on. I remember when I ran my Dresden game, there was a girl. There was a lady who was very young, and she had never played before and was somebody's girlfriend. And the somebody was not there.
You've told this story before.
Right. Somebody else had brought, like a group of friends, and her boyfriend had gone and played with some other game. She just tagged along with one of his friends. And she was extremely shy, and I had a really tough time trying to get her out of her shell, and I literally didn't. And I'm like, at one point I go, okay, she's not going to budge, right? That's fine. She's just going to tell me what she wants to do, and even then she had a hard time. But I never
see, as a GM, that's what if the person is very uncomfortable speaking in front of people, you might say, and a lot of people, I've heard people say this, well, why are they in a role-playing game if they're uncomfortable, right? But then you look at this one, she came with her boyfriend and his friend,
right,
and he left her, and she's just there in this environment that she's never been in before.
Right.
So you can see why she might be uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
So your job as the GM, and a lot of people say it's not really the GM's job, but I disagree. It is your job to make sure everybody at that table is comfortable and having a good time.
That's true.
So what you need to do is you need to look at that person and go, judge it in your head. Okay, she's not going to come up. She's not going to be a great role player. She's not going to come out and role play what she wants to do. So give her options. Would you like to do this or this? This is what will happen if you do this. This is what will happen if you do that. Just let us know what you want to do and make her as comfortable as possible, or him. And a lot of guys are uncomfortable too. And I found that telling people it's okay to talk in the third person or whatever person, my character would like to do this. And you can usually tell how people feel about role playing if they're going, well, this is what I'm doing. Or if they just start talking in their character and you realize that that's the way they're going to play the game. And then there's other people who will go, well, my character would like to do this. And then you can tell how comfortable they are with role playing, right? So you got to take into consideration everybody's comfort levels, and that will help with the social interaction.
Right. I totally agree. And the problem I had with that game, not a problem I had with that game, but in bringing her out of her shell, in a sense, is that everybody else at the table was super experienced and had super strong characteristics or personalities.
Yeah.
Jonah was in that game. There was another lady who had she was like an actress or something, or a budding actress, and I'm like, and then everybody else had like tons of experience, and here's a shy person, first time player, or had never played before, not played very often, and let's face it, going to a convention is kind of a weird experience if you've never been to one, whether it's Comic-Con or something like that. You're gonna walk around going with your mouth wide open, and you're like, "What the heck is going on here?" And at a role-playing game convention or a game convention, it could be even weirder. So I never got her out of her shell. I got her to say things every once in a while, and that was freaking cool.
Was she at least smiling?
At the very end, yeah, she said, and then I asked, was it okay? She goes, yeah, I had a really good time. And then she said exactly, it was like a movie or like a TV show. I'm like, that's all we're doing. We're pretending. And she smiled at that, and she goes, that was pretty cool. And I'm like, okay, good. And so I've had but I usually have very good experiences with, those are two experiences I had with two people who have never played before. And I even said it. I go, well, if this is your first RPG, please understand that I'm not the best GM out there. So there's other GMs that play different types of games. They run a different style of game, and they play a little differently. So if my way of running the game isn't to your style, you don't like it, there's other people who have a totally different style, and you might find something that you like. One game cannot represent every type of style or way of running the game out there. So, but usually the two people I had, they had a good time. They were very entertained, they said, etc. So I think social interaction and rules and stuff, I think you're right. I think they go beyond the page of what is written, and you have to, as a GM, realize that not everybody has the same level of comfort level than everybody else. Even I was going to say about my old group when I was a kid, though nobody was shy in our group, right? But there was Esteban who was, I remember, and I still remember to this day, we were playing pretty late, and we were like tired, and we were playing in my mom's kitchen, and we were playing, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock, and Esteban was like tired, right? And he goes, and he literally gets up off the table, and I don't know who was running, whether me or Felipe was running, and he goes, wake me up when the fighting starts. And he went to my living room and laid down on the couch and proceeded to fall asleep. And we all just kind of looked at each other and kind of laughed. And I thought that was pretty funny. But see, if it was a shy person, they would not say that, right? They wouldn't say that. But so I had a lot of strong personalities in my table, and I never dealt with a really shy person. I mean, just really didn't. And if I did, as a young person playing at the Scout House or at the public library where my brother set up a club, a gaming club, I probably wasn't paying attention if there was any. But I never really did run into any shy people playing. But then again, I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, I wasn't.
You might have not noticed.
I may have not noticed at the time. But I think when we look at social rules and stuff, there are a lot of social rules in games. I think people just have to, if they don't like the way the rules are written, or they don't like the way the rules work, most people will just change them.
You are allowed to change them.
Right. There's nothing saying that anything is written in iron and it cannot be changed. In fact, most role-playing games say these are just guidelines. This is just the way we want to present them, and if you don't like something about it, use it, change it, discard it. That's almost every set of rules says that in a preface or in an introduction, that these are just guidelines for you to make and play the game that you want to play. And I think a lot of people seem to forget that, or
if they're newer to role playing, they may not realize that that's what people do.
I think you're right. Some people say, "Oh, that's in the rules, and that's the only way to play." The rules lawyers, the people who take comfort in knowing the rules, and the rules will be applied evenly,
right,
and without any bias to you. Some people are really worried about being treated differently than other players, but for the most part, I think most GMs out there are pretty good at
a lot of most role playing games. You adjust little rules that you don't like, right?
That's true. Most people do have house rules, as we call them.
Yeah,
home brews.
So there you go. Is that all you wanted to say?
Yes.
So you're comfortable.
I'm okay.
Okay. So good luck. Just remember, it's all about your comfort level, and try to enjoy yourself. And if you're uncomfortable with the social interactions, maybe let your GM know and come up with ways to make yourself more comfortable.
Right.
So there you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.